Hello, you beautiful souls, and welcome to this new podcast episode. I'm so happy you guys tuned in. I'm really excited about today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about how to live a really freaking exciting life. And not to toot my own horn. Do people even say that? I don't know. But not to... I can objectively just say and personally say something that I'm proud of is that I've lived an exciting life. Yeah, hell yeah, I can say that. I've lived an exciting life. I'm really fucking proud of myself because I know for a fact, as someone who used to be incredibly shy and someone who I literally just fought back to being 12, and I went through like this really shy period. I was always really shy, but I was kind of like almost like nonverbal in the sense of like with new people, because I remember we went to England for like a week with our school, and I was at a host family, and there was this girl my age, and she had to walk me to school every day for like 30 minutes, and I couldn't talk to her. Literally, I couldn't get a single word out of my mouth. And it was not the situation, it was not that she was intimidating in any way. I was just so insecure, and I was just so afraid of literally everything. I used to be the afraid child. I used to be fearful. Both of my parents are really anxious people. They love me to death, but they were super anxious all the time. So in school, I was always the person who was afraid of everything. Like, it's so funny because I remember my name, like in school you looked up your name and what it meant, and my name meant the brave one. I think it was something around like the brave one. And I think I looked that up in school or like with friends or my family, and I was like, I'm literally the opposite of brave. Like I'm the least brave person I know, because in school when we went to like theme parks or did anything, even if when we had to do like, what is it called, like a head dive from like the specific dive in like swimming class, I couldn't do it. I was so incredibly afraid. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do like, what is it called, like a roll in like gym class. I don't know, literally just a front forward like roll on the floor on the mat. I couldn't do it. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of talking to people. I was incredibly shy and insecure, and I'm not 100% sure what happened, but I think what happened was that there came a place in time where I noticed I'm not going to settle for an ordinary life. I think that was around the age of 14. I think the first thing, the first things I kind of started dabbling like into were auditioning for The Voice Kids, which I feel terribly, like I wasn't in the live show, but I got into like round 2 like the auditions, and I failed terribly, and but it was like something like I tried. I put myself out there. That was like the first thing besides starting my YouTube channel, which also failed terribly. I was like bullied for it at the age of like 11, and that's kind of when I started getting into like sort of like dipping my toes into doing things that made life a little bit more exciting and that were not the norm. And I think that like as soon as you start doing something that's not ordinary, and I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, you know you're not an ordinary person and you don't want to settle for an ordinary life. I truly believe that my stuff online, my art, whatever I do, my community, it finds the people that are not here to live an ordinary life. And when I say not living an ordinary life, I do not necessarily mean you now have to become famous or you have to become that person that does bungee jumps and like goes skydiving every single day and like travels the world and talks to strangers all day, every day. That's not what I mean at all. And an extraordinary life can also actually be a life that maybe looks a little bit more ordinary from the outside, but actually is not. And we're going to get into that later. But it's obviously always super individual, and it's always about listening to your soul, because that's what I'm all about. Because you can chase this extraordinary life of like, because that was me. Like later on then I saw the extraordinary life that was what was depicted as the extraordinary life online, and I followed that because I was like, I don't want to live an ordinary life, so this is what exciting is. This is what an exciting life looks like. So I started traveling the world and I started doing all of these things, and I am so grateful for it. I learned so much, but actually, if I had listened to my soul in the first place and my intuition, I would have found out that a lot of the things that I did were kind of just things that, and I had to learn that for myself, so it's definitely not something that's an issue, and it's not something that I would ever regret, but it's interesting because I kind of found out that a lot of like my vision of living an exciting and extraordinary life. My voice is also like a bit weird today. I don't know why I'm mumbling certain words. Can look completely different from what other people might deem as exciting. But overall, let's kind of paint a picture. And this might be wrong, this might be off. You'll kind of see. But what do we, in general, count as an ordinary life, or a situation, a life situation, a day-to-day life that you might want to get out of? And if it doesn't matter if you find yourself there or don't find yourself there, but that would literally consist of scrolling on our phones all day, doing the same shit every single day, days passing so fast because our brain, if we do the same thing every single day, time passes super quick. I remember when I traveled like all around the world for a year, that year felt like 5 years in one because I kept experiencing new things. And the fun thing is you don't have to travel the world to do that. But what does, just like scrolling on your phone all day, you kind of know, and your soul knows when you are meant for more, but your current reality is you're not really living that yet, or you're already kind of taking steps towards that and listening to your soul and your intuition, but maybe you're still like, something is missing, like my soul is craving more adventure or whatever. Or if you're just curious on how to live a more exciting life, that's what I'm going to be talking about. And we're going to start right off because I'm like really, I want to just get more into like getting straight to the fucking point because who cares? The first thing we're going to talk about, and we're going to get into so many more like goodies in a second, but I really want to share a lot of my personal experience as well, because I feel like I can give you all this generic advice and say, do this and this, and give you like a Pinterest quote. Then you're just going to scroll and say, what the fuck? Like, I know that, like, my brain is like, ooh, she's right. And then after, you're just like, keep living the same life. But often what I found is if I hear personal experiences, I'm more like, I see a similarity, and then I'm like, wait, I can like connect that better to my life and how I could make changes. But something that leading back, like going all the way back to my childhood, I was, like I said, I was so afraid all the time. My life was very sheltered and very boring until I kind of little by little broke out of that. And then your soul kind of gets a taste of like, life can be a fucking playground. Life, I said that, and I will say that again and again, life, you probably have 80 years on this planet. Life is a fucking blessing. Yes, we should be careful with our body and how, like, we should take care of ourselves, and we should see it as the blessing that it is. So please, like, take care of yourself. But literally, we gotta make use of it. Like, we gotta make use of those hopefully 80 years that we do have on this planet. And what a fucking blessing it is to have 80 years, essentially, because obviously we have certain things like going to school, or maybe it's not as easy as to get out of a certain situation. But you technically, let's be fully honest, like fully honest, you have 80 years of living on a planet in a society that, yes, has a path for you, and yes, they have systems set up in place, they have ways on how you should do certain things. It's really, really tricky because everyone out there seems to be following the same path, essentially, like very much like it feels odd to break out of the line. But essentially, you have 80 years on this planet to figure out, and hopefully you'll figure that out now after this video, sooner than later, that there are no rules and that you can do whatever the fuck you want. It is what it is. And by saying that, I also acknowledge that if you found this video, you're probably a very like-minded soul, so you do not see the statement as... You do know how this statement applies. This obviously does not apply to doing terrible shit. And, like, be a good fucking... Just be a good fucking human. And, yeah, you know how I mean this. But, essentially, there's no right or wrong way to do things. And it's funny because as soon as you kind of learn that, and as soon as you're kind of like... And that usually starts, hopefully, probably in your early 20s or wherever. It started for me, like, at the age of around 15, where I was like, everything seems so ordinary. Everything seems so fucking boring. I need to do some side quests. I need to do some other stuff. And the cool thing is you can start kind of, like I said, your soul gets a taste of it. And that's also what I'm going to get into in a second. Because at first... it's going to be really freaking hard to step out of that line because we live in this society, we live in this world. Maybe your parents also really reinforce those beliefs. Maybe you find yourself in school, uni, wherever you are in a workplace, wherever. It really depends on how many limiting beliefs you have kind of taken on in your life. But there's like this very usually linear path, and that will, in most cases, depends on where you currently find yourself, lead you to lead a very ordinary life. And it's going to be comfortable. And that's what brings me to the point. Living an ordinary life is usually really fucking comfortable until it is not. And that is what I love to talk about the like pain-pleasure scale, because usually the things that give us like, and it's not everything, but usually the things that give us like comfort and pleasure sometimes turn into pain later on, and the things that kind of give you pain in the moment later on turn into pleasure. Obviously this does not apply to everything, but it's something that Anna Lemke talks about in Dopamine Nation, and it's incredibly powerful because it applies to addictions, but it also like breaking addictions, but it also applies to living an exciting life. Because when you find yourself in this situation, pretty much the world is designed for you to stay ordinary and to live an ordinary fucking boring life. And your soul, you're very likely on this planet and watching this video right now because you're like-minded, and because your soul is like, yeah, I'm finding myself in this reality right now and whatever, but I'm like, something's missing. Like, life could be so much more than this, but you're probably finding yourself in a reality where it's like, yeah, but this is like how, I guess how it should be. And why should you change if nobody around you is living, like if everyone around you is living the same life, why would your nervous system feel safe enough to break out of the role, like out of the line? And that's where discomfort comes into play. And that's where doing shit afraid comes into play. And if there's one thing, and I know you hear this everywhere online and it's going to get more nuanced while I talk about it, but literally everything, like every person you see on stage, every person you see wherever, they will tell you, I was so fucking afraid, but I did it anyway. Be afraid, do it anyway. And that is, I could dial it down to one statement on why I live in an exciting life, is I feel the fucking fear all the time. I think I said this in a previous video. I am afraid all the fucking time, and I do it anyway. And this is not here to discourage you. I'm not here to say, oh, you're gonna live now. If you want to live in like an extraordinary life, it's actually like you're gonna be afraid all the time. No, because it's actually gonna get easier, and your life is expanding with like every time you do like, you're afraid and you do it anyway, your entire life expands and your entire life becomes more magical. And one thing that I also really want to talk about before I get into this process of actually doing things afraid, and a few other things that make life more exciting, is that, because what I found, and if you find yourself at that point, I'm at that point where as soon as I find myself, literally there's a hair on top of my head and it's like going crazy, I can't get it down. And I am actually at the moment at a point, like just 1 or 2 weeks ago, I was like noticing that I had to take also like because I was at that point where I was like doing extraordinary stuff all the time. Like as soon as I felt the fear, I was like, I'm gonna fucking do it. And I came to a point where I was like, actually, now I can also find days of like living a little bit more of an ordinary life, and that will actually lead me to have more energy. So it's actually such a like cool thing to break out of that, of like breaking out of like living just the ordinary life and then living the extraordinary life, and at the end finding a fucking balance between the extraordinary and the really exciting life, but also noticing, and that's something I want to talk about because I do have friends and I do know people that live the extraordinary exciting life like all the time. And when I say that, I mean like they travel the world all the time, do stuff all the freaking time. You need balance. Girl, you need balance. I know you really want this extraordinary life of like literally meeting 50 strangers every single day and like going, like traveling the world every second day. You literally, the extraordinary will become, you will become numb to it if you literally overdo it. So, but it's, you know, most people don't overdo it because it would require a lot of fucking discomfort at first to make it mundane later on. But getting back to feeling the fear and doing it anyway, I'm going to give you some examples because I kind of started getting into that. I think the first time I wanted to, like, I started doing photography when I was 14 years old. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm taking photos of my friends. I got this camera. I'm just going to go on Instagram and actually just kind of see. And I went on other photographers' profiles in my city. And I was like, I'm actually going to see if there's like models that don't have that many followers on Instagram that I could maybe DM. I was 14. Instagram was not what it is now back then. It was not. There were no stories. There were no reels. Like Instagram was different back then. But I was still like, I'm 14. I'm going to do that. I had like very bad photos on my Instagram, just like a few I took of friends. It was very much still like Tumblr-ish. I don't know. But I actually ended up reaching out to like 5 or 10 different models. And models, when I say models, I mean like normal people that like to be in front of the camera. And I think 9 left me, like nobody replied, but one girl replied. And I was like, hey, there's this, park in the city. Let's meet up there and take photos. And I remember my mom, I was 14, I was a baby. My mom accompanied me and we went to a cafe beforehand and I had ice cream. And I was so freaking nervous. I was so nervous. And my mom was like freaking out because what do you mean my kid is meeting a fucking stranger at the park? So my mom, the anxious being that she is, she was really fucking afraid. And I was fucking afraid because she made me afraid. And also I was just like, what the fuck am I doing? This is going to be so awkward. I can't, like 2 years ago, I couldn't even talk to a girl the same age on a 30-minute like walk to school. Like I couldn't even ask her how she's doing or like what her favorite show is. And I was really fucking afraid, but I also knew like I cannot stand that girl up. And that girl was like 15 years older than me also. And yeah, I went through with it and I was like, I had all the anxiety symptoms. I had the upset stomach. I was nauseous. I was had the worst anxiety ever. I was so fucking afraid. and I did it anyways. And no, that's not to say that like it, but it started my photography career. It was not like this photo shoot was like the best photo shoot of my life, but it literally led me onto the most beautiful journey that I could have ever asked for. And another example, and that's way down the road of my photography journey, but that was 3 years ago. I was in Portugal, and I had obviously, for photography and constantly meeting new people, gotten a lot more comfortable with doing, like, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. But one thing that I still really struggle with, and I'm gonna also be here and say I still struggle with this today, and that is something I'm actually really like wanting to work on in the next year, because I do have friends that don't struggle with like just approaching strangers, but like cold approaching strangers is still something that I struggle with. I do it sometimes, but it's something I struggle with. But I remember I was in Portugal. I'd love to tell this story because it's so magical, as it truly is. I was in Portugal and I was walking on the beach right in front of like the hotel or like Airbnb, and I remember my camera was like in the Airbnb, like 5-6 minutes away, and I was walking on the beach, and there was this girl with like pale white hair and the most beautiful blue eyes I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, she walked by with her parents on the beach. There were so many people. I saw this girl and I was like starstruck. I was like, and I actually walked past her, and I remember walking past her, and I was like, I will regret it for the rest of my life if I don't ask her if I can take a picture of her and like grab my camera. And I had never ever in my entire life done that before, and I let her walk past me and actually had to gather up my strength because I was nervous as fuck. I was like so anxious, and like truly, like, I was so incredibly anxious. And I gathered up my strength. I was like, I'm gonna do it anyway. It was like the first time I'd ever done something like this. And I talked to her in front of her parents. Like, I could have been like, oh, I would have talked to her if her parents weren't with her, because now it's so awkward. But I was like, I'm gonna talk to her even though her fucking parents are in front of her. And I was completely honest. I showed her my Instagram, whatever. And we ended up taking photos, and she ended up being the sweetest girl ever. We follow each other back then, and like stayed in contact a bit. And it's so interesting because it was a Monday, and I sent in, because every Monday you could send in like a photo Vogue picture, and it was a Monday. And when I got back home after taking the photos, I was like in the hotel, I was like, oh, it's a Monday. I can just quickly edit one and send it into like Photo Vogue. And the next day I actually was on the front page of that Photo Vogue, I can't talk, website. And it ended up like, yeah, it ended up being one of the biggest like achievements in my photography career so far. Which I'm incredibly, like, that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have gone back, and if I would have just been like finding excuses and like not pushing through that discomfort. And the cool thing is, and that's what I love to talk about, because I've done that was like 3 years ago. I've done that again and again and again. So and it gets easier. It gets so much freaking easier because your brain and your nervous system creates proof. Because the thing is, and I love to talk about this, I can do all that I want here and sit here and talk about, you just have to push for the fear. You just have to talk to someone. What's the worst that can happen? Like, it's not going to kill you. You're not going to have a panic attack. And you can still be like motivated by it. But if you don't have any personal proof of things, like, we can internalize everything with our mind and hear so much advice, but if we don't have internal nervous system brain proof from our body that, oh, we talked to a stranger and it didn't kill us. Oh, we talked to a stranger and that stranger didn't spit in our face and said, what the fuck, why are you talking to me? Like, we need our own proof, and the only way to get that proof is to kind of just do it. And you can start lightly. What I personally have always done in my life is don't start lightly. Actually, throw yourself into it. Also, another example, I hosted And that's a funny story. I hosted my first women's circle um last year, and it's still so random. People ask me why I hosted it, and I don't know. I think I saw it online and I was like, this, my intuition is telling me to do it. And it kind of got bigger than I expected it to be. Not like big, but like all spots in the studio were like, all spots were booked, and it was like 13 of us in that like small room. And I had never hosted a workshop before. I had never done a guided meditation. I'd never I had never had people in that sense, like with a workshop, or like having to lead a circle that is also kind of vulnerable, like pay for that, and like me having to like have the responsibility of doing that. Like I was completely throwing myself in the cold water. And it's funny because at the beginning it was like I didn't start lightly. I could have started lightly and done one with like friends or only like 4 people. No, I pushed myself like fully in the water. And it was funny because at the beginning my nervous system was like, what the fuck? Like, and I sat there and the room was feeling really warm, and I essentially had like a small anxiety attack. And that, what I'm saying here, is not to scare you. I'm not here to tell you, oh, I had an anxiety attack. Literally, I was just like stumbling over my words, and I had like my breath was just shallow, and it was very movie like. I was like, is it hot in here? Like, can someone get me a water and like open the window? And like girls stood up and opened the window, and I nothing like happened. I didn't faint or anything. I was just like I was fucking nervous, and it ended up going great. But actually, it's so interesting because back then I was so freaking embarrassed. I was driving, like on the way back, I was like, I'm so freaking embarrassed. And at night, I had to scroll through Reddit and read people's most embarrassing life stories, or like experiences, because I was feeling so embarrassed. And it's funny because now looking back, and I had recovered the next day, like, because the next day, what I actually learned from that is that people started reaching out to me and were like, you being vulnerable in that moment, because I was actually communicating, guys, I'm freaking nervous right now. I've never done this before. They felt more comfortable with me because it, like, in general, it just made the experience like more like we're all on the same level, and it was more vulnerable that way. And I would have never expected that. Also, I made some I made some awesome friends through that women's circle thing. Like, it changed my entire life overall, like hosting community events, which is something I'd never done before, and it was the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done. But what was so interesting about this experience is that, first of all, I did it afraid, and I was rewarded beautifully. And also, I created proof for my nervous system that even though I was really embarrassed, good things happened. And also, I did it and it went great. Like, yeah, at first I thought it didn't go that great because I was hung up on that tiny thing not being perfect. But then I was like, I'm a fucking human being. Also, reading through that through those Reddit stories really helped, because what are we afraid of when we really crave an exciting, extraordinary life? What is usually the thing that holds us back? We're usually afraid of the discomfort and thinking we cannot handle the discomfort, or we're afraid of being embarrassing or actually failure. And first of all, the fun thing is failure, and that's also something that I have found through creating proof in my life, and actually having experience that shaped this like really solid belief in my life now, is that failure does not exist. And the more you do extraordinary stuff, and the more you allow yourself essentially to fail, you will notice that every failure is the best, most valuable, priceless learning lesson that you will ever have. And every failure brings you closer to your dream life, to your most authentic you, because you know like what you maybe shouldn't do, or you've learned from it. You grow immensely. You become a way more expanded person. And failure also, literally failure only has wins in the long run as well, because even if it's something where you're like, what the fuck, there's no positive thing in this, look back in 10 years and what you can do with every fucking failure that you have. You can help other people, and you can make, like, so many people had one of the worst failures of their lives and then ended up writing a book or teaching other people on how to not do that same mistake, or actually learning something so valuable from it that like catapulted them into their true purpose, or like that extraordinary life. So failure, if you see it from a perspective of the glass being half full, failure is fucking awesome. I would actually go so far as to say seek and chase failure. Because you're gonna have a really fucking exciting life if you choose failure in that sense. And by failure, I don't mean like, again, take my statements with a healthy amount of like discernment. Or not discernment, but discernment was the wrong word. But take my statements with, I know you're a smart person. You know how I mean things. But so pretty much also through that experience of leading that women's circle, I was also like, and I'm noticing that now, I've had a ton of really embarrassing experiences in the past year. I've been on a really, and we're gonna get into that, like the next thing is side quests in general. This year so far has been, and it's still happening, my year of side quests. I've never been on as many side quests as I've been in this year, and a ton of shit was really, like, a ton of stuff, just, I'm living in a very exciting life, but a ton of shit is embarrassing. Like, there's tons of moments in social interactions or, like, stuff that happens where I'm, like, at night in bed thinking, like, oh, like, that cringing feeling of, like, oh, what the fuck? Like, I'm so embarrassed. But the cool thing is with embarrassment, first of all, I know people keep saying that statement of, like, it's only embarrassing if you find it embarrassing. I agree. There's all these statements about like, to be cringe is to be free. We live in a society full of those statements, and I agree. But for me personally, they never clicked, and they still don't click for me. They only click for me because I have made my own experiences with embarrassment. Because I feel like everybody nowadays is like, to be cringe is to be free. But are you living an extraordinary life yet? Like, people are still ashamed and afraid of literally everything. And the only way to become okay with being embarrassing and being embarrassed is to be embarrassing and to be embarrassed. Not to be embarrassing, but to be embarrassed as well. And to see, wait a minute, it didn't kill me. And the cool thing is, you kind of get to this point, and that's the point where I'm at right now, when you have done a lot of embarrassing shit or have done a lot of things that led you to be really embarrassed, you kind of get to a point of like, I've been there before. It really loses its meaning. Like, when you are a person and you put up this character and you play this character, and I've been there for such a long time. Like, when I was 15, I was like the designated like cool girl. I pretty much played a character, and it's funny because if you play a character and your image is basically built up on being cool and being like nonchalant and whatever, it feels a lot more detrimental to have done something embarrassing or to be in a situation, because it's like you're breaking the character. But when you start being your authentic self and you start actively putting yourself, like exposure therapy, like putting yourself in situations that are freaking embarrassing, it's so interesting because it loses its power. Because at the moment, I still have these feelings and those experiences of like, that was really awkward. But the cool thing is, whenever I have those now, I kind of have this file in my brain, and that's why I say you need to create your own proof of like, whenever something like that happens, or also when I'm like afraid, I have this like Rolodex, like this file in my brain of like, wait, and that's how our brain works. It's quite simple. Wait, okay, so you feel this emotion, you feel da-da-da. here's all the memories and experiences so far in your life that I've like backed up. So my brain immediately, I just had this like probably a week ago or something, where I was like embarrassed and it was an awkward conversation and there was a lot of awkward silence. Mind you, I could like when I was 15, I couldn't take awkward silence for even just like 10 seconds. I couldn't do it. Now I've actively like actually made it a challenge to push myself to stay in awkward silence because it actually is so freaking helpful. Just a week ago, I had like an embarrassing conversation and it made me think because inside you still get this feeling sometimes of like it gets less, but you get this feeling of like this cringy feeling, like you cringe. And then I thought back to my brain was immediately like searching for experience, like past experiences, and my brain was like, because literally a month ago or 2 months ago, I had the most awkward, cringing, uncomfortable. It was the most terrible, awkward experience of my entire freaking life. I've never been so, because there was like, it was just awkward silence the entire time. It was so fucking cringe. And my brain was like going back to like, wait, I did that. Like I survived. It was really fucking uncomfortable, but if I've done that and have gone through that, you just expand as a person. Like your threshold for holding embarrassment and holding whatever, it just grows. And the only way to do it is to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. It's not going to kill you. So unfortunately, kind of the moral of this little talk here is unfortunately that comfort is going to lead you to live a very ordinary life. And it doesn't have to be like uncomfortable all the time, but following the fear and also where lies excitement. And I really want you to watch out for that combo of like fear and excitement, because of course I'm fucking afraid of like, I feel like I could just do a wrong example. But I'm afraid of many things, but also maybe there's no excitement, so I don't want to do them, so I don't leap towards them. But for example, when I did that women's circle, I was like, even just thinking about it, I was fucking nervous. I was like, that gives me so much fear, but also behind it, I was like, that is so exciting. Like that would be so exciting. If I wasn't afraid, that would be so exciting. As soon as you hit that combo, leap towards it. And I listened to a podcast 2 years ago, and it was about this guy, and he was like teaching his 2 sons life lessons, and he encouraged them and actually pushed them kind of into uncomfortable situations in terms of like having to ask for directions or like having to do specific things of like giving a stranger a compliment, whatever. And he said he truly believes nothing truly wonderful and truly what makes life worth living will ever happen to you if you don't put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and if you don't follow the fear, and if you don't follow through even if there's fear. And that is pretty much why I live an exciting life. The last thing I want to get into is side quests. And when I say side quests, I don't necessarily just mean meaningless side quests, but like I mentioned before, I quickly just want to get into my last year of side quests, because ever since I started following that statement of feel the fear and do it anyway, like when I was like around 16, I've always done side quests, and I'm a very multi-passionate person, but this year has truly been like I didn't even set it as a New Year's resolution, but I was truly just like I'm gonna like I want to do a fuck ton of side quests, and I actually made a list, and there's so many that I could read out loud now, but I want you to do, and especially nowadays if you live in a city, there's so many cool ways to expand your capacity of holding discomfort and actually talking to strangers and doing all that shit. Like I remember I went to a comfort zone challenge with friends in Vienna in the middle of the city. It was really fucking uncomfortable. I went to like time left dinners, which is like basically you get paired with like 5 strangers for dinner. You literally have no idea who they are until you like show up at the restaurant. Did that twice. Literally had like one of my like close friends now. I met her through that dinner. What else? Do shit. Start the like create the places you wish existed in the world, and do also like hobby side quests. Like I went to a voice acting workshop. I started playing tennis or like paddle. There are like free sports playing classes or like meetups also in cities. And the cool thing is you have to, and pretty much if you can take away one thing from this podcast, you have to like follow your excitement and then leap towards the things where you are like, I'm too afraid to do it because it's going to be embarrassing. And then as soon as you feel that feeling, like leap towards it. Yeah. And also, last tip, don't think too much. Like I am practicing this more, even with like smaller things. I'm like a part of a online co-working community now. And at first, you can like enter small rooms. And at first I was like only daring to go into like the big silent co-working room because I was like, like even though I've still done all of these things, like some things are like still where I'm like at first like, but the cool thing is now I always do it anyway, and then it's literally only uncomfortable for a second. But I was still like, like, and I was about to enter a room or like whatever, and it was only like 4 people in it, so I knew I was gonna have to talk. And I was like in the comfort of my home, because usually, you know, in the comfort of my home, I'm like, I only do the uncomfortable side quest stuff outside of my home. So I was like, oh, it's like my safe space. And in that moment of like clicking on the room, I was like, should I go in and actually like, but also I'm like intrigued. And in that moment, I was like, I'm not gonna give myself that much time to think about it. Like, I'm just gonna fucking click on that button. It was great. So actually don't, like, I think that's what so many people say, and I actually couldn't recommend it more. People even say this within like morning routines. If you struggle to get up in the morning, count to like from 5 down and tell yourself like, if you're not out of bed by 0, like you just gotta do it. Or like, especially when it comes to, I'm not saying you have to do this with every decision. Sometimes you have to think about it for a longer time. But if you are afraid of specific things, and if it's not like, you know, the dangerous, like something dangerous. But for example, if it's like giving a compliment to a stranger, which by the way can lead to so much magic and so much beauty. If the thought arises in your brain, don't give yourself time to think about it. Don't wait until there's a right moment for it. You're just not going to do it if you're going to wait for a right moment. You're just not going to do it. Let's be completely honest. Last thing I also quickly want to get into, usually what also leads us to not dare to live an exciting life, is because often it's also tied to us thinking that other people are going to judge us. It usually it ties back to other people. Obviously also the fear of failure is often in there, but also like usually we're like afraid of what other people think of us when we fail. It's usually not that we care that much about it. But also something that has helped me immensely is, first of all, always giving people the benefit of a doubt, even if it seems like I'm washing myself. But for example, if I give someone a compliment or I smile at someone and they don't smile back, I'm just like, they probably had a bad day. Or maybe, and that has happened to me a ton of times, like people smiled at me and I didn't get it in that moment and they looked away and I didn't smile back and I was like, oh, I feel like such a terrible person. That could have been happening, whatever. And also always know, especially when it now comes to interacting with strangers or whatever, focus on yourself. And especially if you, for example, staying with that thing of like giving compliments to strangers, you're not doing it. You shouldn't do stuff like that, like complimenting strangers, to receive a response. Like, of course it's nice when people are nice back, or like say thank you or like happy, but that's not why you should do it. It should come from a genuine place in your heart where you're just like, I want to give that compliment. And if even if they react into like in a bad way, in a, you know, then that shouldn't be your motivation in the first place. Just be like, I am choosing to spread love, and that should be enough. You should not care about the outside, or the external kind of thing you get from it. Just kind of being like, hey, you did that. You chose to spread love and open your heart and to do it, and not do it just for yourself, because that would be a little bit like narcissistic to just do it for yourself, in terms of like, I'm gonna give this person a compliment so then I feel good about, if they react nicely, then I feel like, good about it. Like, girl, it should be a selfless thing. But it also, of course, makes sense when people don't react nicely. It can suck. But also, then you create proof again in your brain that even though they didn't react in the nicest way, still didn't kill you. And then if it happens again in the future, you were like, or something else happens, you're just like, okay, I lived through that, so I can also handle that. And it's also really important to know in general, if you allow yourself to put yourself in exciting situations, and maybe you're like, oh, I wonder what people think about me, or especially if you go to events or like gatherings or retreats or wherever you go, or outside alone, and you start going on side quests, like going to a cafe or trying out something new in your city, and you're just like, oh, what will people think about me? First of all, it is 1 second of their day, and you keep replaying it, they have literally forgotten about you in a fucking second. They don't care. Everyone is so fucking focused on themselves. And then kind of play the loop. Like, what happens if they do say, like, truly put yourself through that situation? What if they think you're embarrassing? What does that change about your experience? Nothing. It literally changes nothing. And also, the last thing I'm going to leave you with, if we constantly go to... Why did that sound like we? Never mind. If we constantly are anxious and go to places and we think people are judging us, we are actually judging other people, because we immediately label them as a judgy person. Like, why are you assuming that that person is a mean person and judging you? Usually, I had this talk with a friend recently. We usually go through life, unless we have like traumas or specific experiences, thinking that everyone's brain out there works exactly like ours. That's why our world is often so fucked up, and why we have so many people that, we feel like, what the fuck, why does your because they assume everyone on the planet thinks like they do. And it's interesting because we probably think, oh, they must be judging me or whatever. Dude, you have no idea how their brain works. They literally, first of all, probably didn't even see you. Second of all, we're probably so in their head that they thought, even if they looked at you, they probably thought about something else. They maybe actually thought something really nice, or maybe instead of you being like, oh, they probably thought I was like a lonely, weird girl going to this event alone, like she's pitying me, that's so embarrassing. They were probably like looking at your hair and being like, or like your face, and probably being like, oh, she reminds me of that one actress, or like she reminds me of that one friend I have, whatever. They're like, or maybe they do think you're embarrassing, and then you can also just be like, wait, like, hold that discomfort, because what if actually, like, you can brainwash yourself, and usually 99% of the time your delulu is going to be right, because people usually are not mean and malicious. And even if it's like this 1% and that girl actually thinks, first of all, you will never know unless it's like a straight up mean girl or like a mean guy and they say something. But then also see that as a win, because you get to give your brain like that Rolodex a new experience of like, I've gone through that. I can do anything now. Literally the best things in my life have happened because I was like able to see my past experiences and be like, wait, I have like gone through that, and I can, like, if I've gone through that, like I'm thinking back to a bad experience, I'm like, I can do anything. Like, it truly expanded me. It truly expanded my life and my capacity and my ability to like live an exciting life. And girl, you deserve, like, girl or boy, you deserve to live an exciting life because your soul was not like, and also your soul won't settle for an ordinary life. I feel like if I can tell you one thing here, I feel like I just know my target audience. I know the kind of people that will find this. Um, there's no way around it. There's no way around it. Your soul won't settle for a boring life. And I think the only thing is, how long is it going to take you? And if you find out about it now, like let's say you're in your early 20s, what the fuck? Despite everyone saying the world is ending in 20 years, it's not. If you find that out now, you have like 60 more years of living the most fucking exciting life that you could ever have. But it's also like, maybe you internally know and your mind knows, but you're still gonna, you can't just keep it. I think 2025 and the next years to come are all about embodiment, because we live in this world of knowing everything. You know everything. You probably literally are the like most educated person on self-help, and like, you know everything. You probably know everything that is wrong with you. You know everything that you should do, that you should fix in your life. Everything you like, you know everything. Are you embodying it? I think that's the whole issue, and that's also something that that was a hard truth I had to hear, because we know everything through TikTok, YouTube, the podcasts you're listening to, the hours and hours of podcasts I've listened to, where I was like, oh, this is life-changing, and the awareness I got through that was like life-changing. But was I embodying it? And the true magic always just happens when you start embodying stuff. So actually we would do really good with less knowledge but more embodiment. So if there's one thing, and I actually learned that from doing a side quest, because I went to Julian himself's no anxiety workshop, where I actually ended up talking to, I was really fucking afraid, because like I said, I don't cold approach strangers, and actually straight up went to two guys later after the event. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to do it. I don't like it. And then I talked to them. But the whole event was like, and I wrote down a few things. And the main thing was like, you can know everything in your mind, but you have to start fucking embodying it. You have to put yourself into uncomfortable situations. And you have to do the stuff instead of constantly watching YouTube videos about it, or like podcasts, or like books. I know this is like a hard truth. I know this is like frustrating to hear, but it's also really cool because it now gives you your kind of map, or your guide on what you should do. So first of all, write a list of what are you fucking afraid of, but also what really fucking excites you. When you start writing things down, there might be some things where you're like, this is too big for me. Like, for example, you might be someone, you spend all your time doom scrolling on your phone in your room, and you write down, I would love to host a workshop, and then your brain immediately goes like, oh, one day, because I can't do that right now. Or you're like immediately like, oh, I could never do that because that's too big of a jump. Literally write down everything. And like I say, you can start with the small stuff. And I'm not saying you should host a TED Talk or something. But literally, like, whatever topic, like, host a dinner, or, like, a little workshop at home, or put up a flyer, or go to, like, you have to do stuff that most people wouldn't do. So constantly ask yourself as well, first of all, what are you afraid of, but what also really excites you? Like, what are the things that intrigue you? Because that's what your intuition is telling you to do. But also, if there's fear behind it, because there's also things that we really, really love, and we're also excited about them, but there's maybe no fear. And you should still do those things. We need those hobbies and things in our lives, but usually they will lead us to stay in our comfort zone. But a question you can also always ask yourself, and that's something that I apply to also like other stuff in your life, in your day-to-day life, be the 1%. That is something I like. Funnily, I only do this at the moment. I have my other ways of, this like feel the fear and do it anyway. But like the point where I do it the most is like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, because I read a quote was like, only the 1% take the stairs instead of the elevators. I'm like, so I always take the stairs. But in general, like constantly ask yourself, like, what would the other 99% do? Do the fucking 1%. Because look at the people around you. Look at the people out there. Look at society. Do you want to live their life? Do you want your life to be a replica of their life? Because that's usually the path, like the default state that we find ourselves in when we come into this world, and like the conditioning and like from school, it's kind of what it's really like drilled into us. That is the 99% of the world. Do you want to be, because you're probably currently in that 99%. Do you want to stay there? Is that, if you lay in your deathbed at the end of your life, would you be happy settling for an ordinary life? Because it can, in those moments of being afraid, be like, oh, but my ordinary life is also so nice. Yes, you need that balance, but would you actually be happy at the end of your life if you were like, oh, I really just mindlessly lived in a 99%, and I was like really settling in my life, that one precious life you got, and you were settling? What the fuck? No, but get in that habit of constantly asking yourself, what would the 1% do? Become that 1%, and get comfortable with that, because it's going to get easier. I've been, for the past 6 years, longer, really streaming again. Swimming against the stream. I wasn't streaming, but I was swimming against the stream. It gets so much easier, because the cool thing is you find people that also swim against the stream, and then it gets like your path gets less lonely, which is really, really nice. But that is pretty much your blueprint. And do side quests. Do a whole fucking ton of side quests, and also don't be a judgy person by constantly thinking that other people judge you. I feel like that's also been a real like wake up call for me. Yeah, I feel like, yeah. And I already know it might take you longer or not, but you're not here to live an ordinary life, and you already know that. It might just take a little time before, because at the end of the day, it's all about embodiment. You probably knew everything that I said already. Now it's just because you might, like, in this video now you feel like really excited, like I'm gonna talk to a stranger, I'm gonna do something exciting tomorrow, but you might have lost that momentum, or like that excitement or motivation. So you're just gonna have to do it afraid. You're just gonna have to do it, like I said, you're just gonna have to embody it, and therefore your exciting life begins in an embodied state of doing it anyway and doing the things. So I feel like my brain is getting rotted. I've talked way too much. But I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode. As always, you can find everything that you need in the show notes or in the description down below. If you're here on YouTube, please subscribe and leave a like. If you're here on podcast, please rate this podcast. It helps a lot. As always, I know I was kind of on a little break. Don't know. It's definitely not going to be my last one. I'm going with the flow. But at the moment, I will upload quite consistently. So, I would love for you to stay on the, like, I literally can't talk anymore. I would love for you to continue to be a part of the journey. And I hope you have a beautiful day, night, whatever time it may be. And I'll see you again soon. Bye.